Is the Arizona Cardinals front seven good as is? What are the biggest needs the Cardinals still have? And could they take a wide receiver at 16? Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Cardinals, Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter, Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen. Free wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please go to the YouTube channel. Search Locked On Arizona Cardinals. Hit that subscribe button, man. Leave a like, leave a comment. Really happy with the engagement over the last couple weeks, whether it be Twitter, DMs, or YouTube comments. Keep it up. For those, this is a deep cut here. For those that have been around for years, you know I call it the allergy show. It happens twice a year when the weather changes, like officially in Arizona, where I look like I go 12 rounds with Mike Tyson. This was supposed to be that, but I've battled and I've rallied. And I think it's because of who I brought on today. I always want to impress Donnie Druin from Sports Illustrated. I think that's what it is. Don, I don't want you to see me like that, bro. I don't want you to see me like that, where my whole face is flipping red like a tomato. You know?
I was thinking 12 rounds with Snoop Dogg, but Mike Tyson works too, right?
Yeah, I know. Well, that's the thing. It's like, does he need to get drug tested? Maybe for other things. No, I absolutely not. I even put eye drops in today, which is the wild thing. So here we go. This is what we're going to discuss today, Donnie Druin. The front seven, they've added two key pieces. It's what, everything that we've been talking about with Josh Sweat and Dalvin Tomlinson. What are their biggest needs still? And Mike Tannenbaum, former NFL GM, you'd think for a reason at this point, now with ESPN, has the Cardinals taking a wide receiver at 16 and not even the consensus number one or number two wide receiver on anybody's board. We'll discuss that in the final segment. But what we've seen so far this offseason is Monty Ossenfort methodically checking boxes, not spending a lot of money. Dalvin Tomlinson's reported contract was more than what it ended up being with a $13.5 million guaranteed over 2 years. Josh Sweat, 4-year, $40 million guaranteed. That fills the two biggest needs the Cardinals have had over the last 2 seasons.
Yep.
Say they don't go edge or defensive tackle at 16. Is that enough to run with?
I do. I do think it's enough to run with. Now, whether or not you are going to be deep enough to make it through a 17-game season and hopefully make a postseason appearance, that's a completely different question. I think a lot of people underestimate the importance of depth to it. I think that's why the final 53-man roster that the Cardinals and all the other 31 NFL teams assemble is so important, because you're going to have guys get nicked up. You're going to have guys who just play bad. You're going to need another replacement. You're going to need a refillable player at multiple different spots. And for Cardinals front seven, specifically under Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rallis, that rotate their guys heavily, especially along the defensive line, especially at edge rusher, they're going to need more capable bodies. Now, I think I like what they did a lot, having a trio along the defensive line of Dante Stills, Darius Robinson, and then Dalvin Tomlinson. Like you said, edge rusher on paper seems a little bit deep because you have Zaven Collins, BJ Ojulari, Josh Sweat, and then Baron Browning. Like, there's going to be one odd man out, but you have to think like Zaven's not going to get another contract here in Arizona. BJ Ojulari, as much as I really like him, we still need to see his potential come to fruition. And until we see it, that's all that is going to be is potential. They're kind of baking on the same thing with Baron Browning. They liked what he did towards the end of the season, but nothing really dramatic stood out to where like they needed to bring him back under every circumstance. And then Josh Sweat, there's even questions about Sweat's ability to get after the passer and a defense that's not going to allow him to be one-on-one all that often compared to the Philadelphia Eagles star-studded defense that won them a Super Bowl. So there's questions, and General Manager Monty Ossenfort at the NFL Combine told us that, hey, like our goal in free agency is to not have any pressing needs come to the draft. Like after free agency, we need to be able to play a game. I do think they're able to do that. I do think if the season started right now, they would be fine. But the draft is the perfect opportunity, Alex, to really just bolster the top two needs, defensive line and edge rusher, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's right. Donnie Druin, Sports Illustrated, joining me here, Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. I mean, because that's the thing. It's like, they didn't have to get the number one pass rusher or the number one interior defensive lineman. Their front was so bad last year, you didn't have to. And they gave him $55 million combined guaranteed over 2 and 4 years, respectively, with the two contracts. I think what this means to me, and I think you're right, like I've been pounding the table for interior offensive line specifically for the Cardinals because it is a weak spot right now. If they don't bring back Will Hernandez, if they do, I'm going to be shifting tune. But Darius Robinson and Bija Ojulari, if they're 80% of what everybody expects them to be, this is going to be one of the more solid fronts in football. Yep. And because it's sight unseen, because Darius Robinson probably missed an extra month last year because his mom died, it's like, okay, chill out, everybody. Things are more important than football sometimes. Let's just wait. This is an incomplete. Jonathan Gannon said this is year 1.5. I'm paraphrasing for Darius Robinson because, he didn't really play last year. And when he did, there was no talent there for him to bounce off. So it's like, okay, I'm a rookie and I don't really have any sort of talent to go shoulder to shoulder with. Same with Bija Ojulari. We'll see. But if those guys are 70 to 80% of what people expect, this defense could be very good very quickly with the anchor still being the secondary, right? I mean, I feel like it's really supplanted the lack of talent for the last decade in the secondary balance-wise, aside from a couple dudes, to like, oh my God. I mean, this could be no-fly zone territory.
Yeah, we're looking at a secondary to where it felt like last offseason heading into it. It's like everybody besides Garrett Williams needs to be replaced. Like everybody, like wipe the slate clean, keep Garrett, and kind of move forward from there. But now it's such a different tune heading into the 25 NFL draft because you have Starr, you have Max Belton, you have Sean Murphy-Bunting, who I know is not a fan favorite, but at the very, very least, he's a veteran guy in that room who has been on the Super Bowl winning team. He was a big part of that Super Bowl winning team. And then you have Garrett Williams, who, for my money, is emerging as one of the best corners in football, especially at the slot position. It doesn't feel like a need. I still feel like they could possibly go Will Johnson if he's there, just because you can never have enough secondary players in the National Football League, especially today. But adding to that, Alex, is that the secondary and then the pass rush complement each other, right? Like there's no one's more important or the other. And I feel like by them adding a premier pass rusher in Josh Sweat, by them adding a disruptor along the defensive interior line with Dalvin Tomlinson, not only did they help their ability to stop the run, create havoc at the line of scrimmage, and get after the passer, they helped the secondary out a whole lot too moving into next year.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, agreed. I just think that while, yes, you build in the trenches. That's what people think. Offensive line, defensive line, pass rush. That's what wins. Drafting a corner is not the same thing as drafting a wide receiver just because they play outside. Like if you have an elite secondary, your pass rush can be B-. If you have an A pass rush, just like you said, it's like the secondary doesn't have to be as strong. If you have both, obviously you're probably competing for Super Bowls every year. But the Will Johnson thing is fascinating because I think Trevor Sycamore was the first one. My buddy, former Locked On guy who's now all world of Pro Football Focus. You see him everywhere. He was the first one to mock a corner to the Cardinals that I saw. I'm like, that's mind-bending. And I'd be in it because in that spot at 16, well, now, I mean, Will Johnson is now top 10 looking at. So, I mean, it seems like that's not what they're going to be able to get. But the Cardinals are going to get a top 10 pick at 16 because of the quarterbacks. Ashton Genty, there's probably a wide receiver that's going to go, even though nobody says there is. Like, the Cardinals are going to have a top 10 pick at 16. And the good part about this, before we pivot to the biggest needs next segment, is at least they know what their 2 or 3 needs are. At the end of 2022, it was everything. Going into last offseason, it's like, all right, there's a lot, and you're not going to be able to address all of it. And now it's like, okay, there's 2 or 3. And regardless of who's there at 16, they're going to be able to fill one of those needs. And that's a massive, massive spot for them to be in moving forward.
Completely agree. I think they're in a really great spot at 16. Like you said, there's going to be so much talent that gets pushed down to them. They did a good job in free agency of plugging in pretty much all of their holes. Right guard to me is still a position, but I think we'll get into that a little bit in the next segment. But they can move up, they can move down. Like it's truly like all options are on the table, which is a very good thing if you're a general manager.
Well, and the moving up part, and I did a segment on this last week, so you check that out over at YouTube, is they have the draft capital to do it, and it won't break the bank. They can do whatever they want and not mortgage any sort of future. I mean, unless they want to, barring moving up to top 3 and drafting Abdul Carter and having to give away a boatload, which they would never do. Like, this is a stable cabin without those things dropping. You have to put damn oxygen on your mouth like it's been for the last 10 years before this. Like, this is what a stable environment looks like with a team that is close to having a full roster that has come from the depths of hell to get here. And it took, a couple off seasons. I'm sorry, it wasn't quickly like other people expected. There still are needs. Naturally, we've alluded to a couple here. What are the other ones? We'll discuss in the next Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, man. If you didn't know that, maybe you should be drug tested. And FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. And right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. You want to pick the future on who's going to win the championship? Good luck. There's probably 10 teams that could win, like there's legitimate like 2 or 3 1%ers. And then there's 3 or 4 that if you told me that they won the championship at the end, you'd be like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. A couple balls bounce their way. You can do it all at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on college hoops action all tournament long. Donnie Drew, Sports Illustrated, one of the 1%ers, first name, last name on Twitter. It'll be acknowledged every single time you join.
Love it.
It's and Druin, it's is that Irish? Seems like an Irish.
I think it's a mutt. I think I'm just a mutt of European countries, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough. But I mean, irrespective of your ancestors, 1%er status on Twitter at Clancy's Corner for me. So yeah, I mean, I've been stubborn about the Cardinals going offensive line. I think there's a couple different reasons why. One, they're going to get a top 10 offensive lineman at 16. And I think that that's something that even though it's a weaker class than it has been in years past, and the defensive tackle group and the edge rusher group are deeper, even more solidifies the fact that you take somebody who could protect Kyler Murray. And I don't think you could ever go wrong. If you take offensive linemen, regardless of need, every first round in every draft, it's warranted because the most important thing, it's not pass rush, it's not stopping opposing teams, it's none of that. It's protecting the quarterback. Ask Caleb Williams. Ask Patrick Mahomes in the 2 Super Bowls that he lost. It doesn't matter how great your quarterback is if you can't protect them. They were great last year for 2.5 months. And then for some reason, Jonah Williams came back and they were terrible. And it had nothing to do with him specifically, but those lined up. In the ranking for biggest needs still, regardless of if Will Hernandez comes back or not, where does offensive line, whether it's interior or on the outside in tackle position, rank?
It's got to be up there. I don't know where I would place it numerically. I think the need for a future right tackle would have been there regardless of Jonah Williams' injury to end the year. Him having 1 year left on his contract, him being placed on injury reserve twice last year, really opens that door. And I think Calvin Beachum could be good for them again. I think he could be another stopgap for them again. But like you have to play the long game here. And that's exactly what the NFL draft is for. And I really like the point you made in the last segment of how like people wanted to get after Darius Robinson after 1 year of barely not playing. Whenever he did play, like he didn't put up gaudy numbers in the box score. You don't draft players and then just throw the whole thing away after 1 year. That's not how the draft works. That's not how development works. It's not how any of this works, right? Bringing that back to this point, you need to always kind of be thinking about the future, and whether it's right guard. I don't know how much they like Isaiah Adams. I feel like they do. I feel like I would be content with rolling with him moving to next season. But if there's a premier guy there for them, if they do bring back Will Hernandez, if they get another guy in a free agency who they feel like they can get the job done, I think they're comfortable doing that. But I think Daniel Jeremiah made a really, really good point on one of his draft shows a couple of weeks ago where he said the offensive line, more than anything, you're only as good as your weakest point. Because it doesn't matter if you have 4 Hall of Famers. If you have that one weak link, that guy's going to get your quarterback killed every single time. And I think the Cardinals need to take that same approach too. Like I said a little bit earlier, they did a really great job addressing edge rusher. They did a great job addressing the defensive line. They can roll into the season with that. There's not a ton of great depth there, but they can do it. Right, they can do it. Offensive line, that's where it gets a little bit more. I do really like how you brought up the depth of the defensive line class. I mean, this is one of the deepest classes we've seen at the position in what feels like years. So I feel like the Cardinals could very well just say, hey, you know what? There's a lot of good guys we can get on day 2, maybe even early day 3. We plug those holes in free agency. Let's protect Kyler Murray. Let's keep him upright. But on the other side of the token, I don't think they're completely sold on just offensive line almost no matter what heading into pick number 16. I truly think it's best player available. Truly, whether that's interior, whether that's offensive tackle, whether that's edge, defensive line, corner, whatever it might be. They put themselves in the position, not to have the luxury, but they put themselves in a position to where they can just take a great football player, regardless of what they need, regardless of the position. And you know what? If you draft good football players, normally that's a good thing.
Yeah, especially on the defensive side with JG and Nick Rallis. They're wizards. They put people on the field who can produce. It doesn't really matter what position they play in any specific instance. I mean, I think that, the thing that terrifies us loose. I mean, I'm not drama queening here, but it's like if something happens to Yalta Froholt, the Cardinals are going to be in trouble immediately. Yeah. So I think my biggest, if I could pick the perfect pick at 16, all things being equal, or if they trade back and they have the opportunity to do it, a swing guard center, like John Gaines, they wanted at a 4th-round pick before he got hurt 2 years ago. And then, he's played sparingly and he's been okay. This isn't a Sean Harlow, Max Garcia situation from Rodney Hudson, what he used to be. What Tyler Linderbaum would have been, unless, instead of Hollywood Brown. But that part is if one of these guys gets hurt, we're having a very and this isn't a year that you can be all right, you know what? Just piecemeal it together. It's going to be fine. Move on to next year. This could be Kyler Murray's last year as quarterback. Yep. We're not going to have that conversation yet. I don't think it's necessary to have yet, but you give the opportunity for Kyler Murray to succeed as close to in a vacuum as possible on an NFL team and determine if he's the guy in a perfect situation to get you to where you want to go. Yep. And while he hasn't shown it during the last 2 months of pretty much every season that he's been in the league, the offensive line wasn't great for a chunk of it. I think that's kind of where I'm jaded here, where it's you want to just see, because if the offensive line's bad, then what do you do with Kyler Murray? It's you can't really blame him as much if the offensive line is bad.
100%. I think that's such a great evaluation tool as well, because if you know for a fact that your offensive line is solid, that takes one variable out of the equation of what you decide to do at the future of the quarterback position. Like you said, it's not a conversation that I feel like we need to have right now, but just evaluating all the future, you just want to check all of the boxes possible. And if it does come down to trying to make that decision, if it does come down to that evaluation, hey, you know what? We piece together a pretty solid offensive line. Is it a top 5 unit? Absolutely not. Top 10? Probably not. But good enough to win games. Good enough to win games to where the protection isn't the problem. So we need to see what else is.
Yeah. And I think that with that, it's with all this said, I don't see a world where they don't trade back. I mean, especially with the group between 25 to 80, where it's all kind of the same. So you trade back, you draft an offensive lineman or a D tackle, and then the 2nd and 3rd rounds, you get a pass rusher, an offensive lineman, another defensive tackle, or another pass rusher, or corner. This is it's almost better. And I've said this kind of tongue in cheek, but it's true. It's almost better that the Cardinals beat San Francisco in week 18. So they're not at 12. It's it gives you more wiggle room to be able to maximize the first 3 rounds of the draft. And it's something that I think San Francisco's at 12, whatever they are, 13, 14, whatever it is. They're a couple picks ahead of the Cardinals. It's going to be fascinating, but I think bringing this in for a landing with these first 2 segments that we've done, it's they've got options, and anything that they do will get them exponentially closer to where they want to be than where they were at the start of last season. And that's what last offseason, last draft, this offseason with the free agency, and this draft, that's going to be the tools to get them on the precipice of something where you're looking at an NFC West crown, hopefully, or you're going to be looking for a new quarterback in 2025. Locked on Cardinals, or 2026. Locked on Cardinals, your team every day. Could the Cardinals take a wide receiver at 16? Get the barf bags out, but we're going to talk about it next. Please go to the YouTube channel. It's just Locked on Arizona Cardinals. Hit that subscribe button, man. You can leave a review where you want. I'm never going to ask you to go do it. I'm just happy that you're here. This is the Allergy Show. I look a lot better than I have over years past. OGs will understand that. If not, you'll know it for next year. Or 6 months from now when summer turns into fall here in Phoenix. Donnie Druin, Sports Illustrated, covering the Cardinals, at Donnie Druin on Twitter, joining me here from a guest room at his girlfriend's house. That's dedication. We don't have any real fourth wall when it comes to media, especially beat reporters, writers, and stuff. It's wherever you find a little nook to record something. Like that's
man,
pretty much where it is.
The asinine places I've written stories and like appeared on podcasts at, like it's truly astounding, and then I'm sure you know all too well.
Yeah, my greatest one was during the lockdown years ago when I was producing the morning drive show with Jody Ayler on Fox Sports 910 for 2 months longer. He was doing the morning show from his closet at home. I didn't see his face for 2+ months, and had to do a show that was synchronized together. So I understand. I totally understand in some form or fashion. What I don't understand is former NFL GM, now ESPN talking head Mike Tannenbaum, did a mock draft, and I understand the exercise. He did a mock draft in the minds of a GM, not what he thinks the teams will take, in the minds of the GMs for what he thinks the team should take. And he had the Cardinals taking Matthew Golden, wide receiver out of Texas, at 16. Now, Matthew Golden isn't he's not on anybody's top 20 draft board. He's the third, maybe fourth receiver that's looked to go off the board. And his thought process was, you need more offensive pop from the wide receiver room. And while I understand the thought process, it's not completely irrational. My thoughts, and I want your thoughts on this, Donnie Drew and Sports Illustrated, is the Cardinals already have their wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. It's Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr. And when you look at that tandem across the NFL, there are maybe 8 teams that have that talent in the same roster. And I know that Trey McBride's not a wide receiver, but he's the first option in the pass game until Marvin Harrison Jr. wrangles that from him. You hope it's 1-1A all year, but Marv hasn't shown that yet. So when I see wide receiver, I'm like, yeah, the Cardinals could use a vet, maybe. They could use a guy to bolster the room, but drafting a rookie wide receiver doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I don't mind drafting a rookie wide receiver. I do mind it at pick number 16. Granted, we had just talked about how they could go BPA, and they did a great job of filling all the needs they needed to in free agency. Still feel like edge rusher, still feel like defensive line, still feel like interior or offensive tackle is still a much higher need than a receiver. Like you said, even if you want to throw Michael Wilson into the camp, I think Michael Wilson is I think Wilson's a very fine wide receiver too. I still think there's a lot of upside there. For an offense that loves to run the ball, loves to establish the run, is going to run the ball, predicates itself off of play action whenever they do throw the football. Yeah, you would love to have receivers in there. You would love to have a guy like Matthew Golden there. Does it make sense at pick number 16 in the first round with so much other stuff in a meat and potatoes draft that Monty Austin-Fort needs? No. Yeah.
And I mean, for exercise, even though this is ridiculous, so let's chill with the comments here. I could validate them taking a running back over a wide receiver at 16 with this offense. It would make more sense to have talent in that backfield with James Conner and Trey Benson than drafting another wide receiver, because I think you're right. Like Michael Wilson, even though his separation numbers are awful, okay, his separation numbers are terrible. What he lacks in that, like most wide receivers who don't have blazing speed, he catches everything in his catch.
Everything.
Okay?
He doesn't separate. Cool. He's coming down with it anyway.
He is fantastic along the sidelines, which not all receivers are. Ask Trevor Lawrence about that with Calvin Ridley and Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk, how many almost touchdowns there were, but those guys couldn't get their feet in bounds over the last couple seasons, okay? Marvin Harrison Jr., incredible at it. Trey McBride, incredible at it. Michael Wilson, incredible at it. And the biggest sticking point I have in the wide receiver room for me, and obviously this is greater on a curve, but maybe get Greg Dortch involved between preseason and when the Cardinals are eliminated from the playoffs. Like, what I saw in week 17 and week 18 made my blood boil, because it's like, wait, hold. You just want to slip screen for Greg Dortch, and he took it up the seam for 35 yards? Where the bleep was that all year when you needed a burst? Like, they have all of the tools. And I'm going to have you on before the season starts probably a couple times. I think that Drew Petzing, say they're 55-45 run pass at this point, something like that, maybe even more run than pass. I think it's time to maybe more meet in the middle. Get the ball in Kyler Murray's hands and let them move the ball down the field through the air. And I think with Greg Dortch and Michael Wilson, like, they have an embarrassment of riches compared to so many pass catching rooms in the NFL. And it's something that really frustrates me. And you bring Zay Jones in. I forgot Zay Jones was on the team last year, even after he came back from the 6-game suspension. So I think that also compounds the thing about wide receiver at 16. Obviously, that's not the choice. And I know running back is not the choice either. Don't eat my lunch for that. I was saying it as an exercise.
I think they need a burner. I think they need a legit deep threat. Greg Dortch, he's very, very shifty. He's a solid route runner, but he's not a burner guy. He's not a guy who could take the top off of the defense. He's not a quote unquote deep threat. I feel like the Cardinals don't necessarily have that. I think they tried to make Marvin Harrison Jr. that. I think they tried to make him a 50-50 contested catch guy, but that's never what he was at Ohio State.
Yeah.
Never. And I'm watching Kyler throw these like 50-50 balls. And granted, like Marv's got the build for it, right? He's got the frame for it, but that's just not in his repertoire, at least not yet.
Yeah.
At least not yet. Maybe that's something that evolves over the offseason. But I think if they do add another receiver to the room, it needs to be a guy that you can have Kyler drop back, chuck it 50 yards down the field, and just have him be completely wide open because nobody can catch up to him.
Like an MVS kind of guy.
Yeah, like your John Brown.
Like a Mike Wallace kind of guy. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You hope he's bigger than, Jerron Brown and JJ Nelson and because JJ Nelson was that guy for a long time. And I think that, it's interesting, especially in this day and age with penalties and stuff. That's one thing that that's what they thrived on was 45-yard pass interference calls that the Cardinals just don't have anymore. And obviously
Joe Flacco special.
Yeah, it's not how you bank an offense naturally. This is much more death by 1,000 cuts with this offense, with the chance for space, especially with Trey McBride, because they figured it out. They're on a different plane than the rest of the defenses. Trey McBride's always open.
Yep.
I do think that. Now, let me ask you this, because this is completely off topic. It's not, but it's tangential. Does it feel like Kyler Murray's got a little zip taken off his deep ball? Like, does it look like he doesn't have – because I remember when he was throwing – remember the 3-touchdown game from Christian Kirk in Tampa Bay on the road where he was just throwing these lasers? It seems like there's a lot of air under all of his balls that are deep balls now. And maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see a lot of zip like I used to.
I still think you can get the ball down the field. I honestly would have to go back and watch it to see if I can agree or disagree with that. But from everything I remember of Kyler playing last year, he's still able to push the ball down the field. I don't know how much of it is the offense. I don't know how much of it is the scheme. I don't know if the ACL injury somehow has anything to do with it. Not a bad question to ask, though.
No, I don't know. It's just fascinating. But, yeah, I mean, I think especially with wide receiver, it's Drew Petzing's got to get it right. Like, this is not something where there's mid-season adjustments. Like, you have your plan, you have your contingency plan, and they've been pretty good with the scripted 20 plays. I mean, they scored on their first drive, a lot last year.
Yep.
So it's something that the adjustments, and this is on Kyler Murray too, okay, but the offense needs to not be an issue next year, whatever that looks like. Figure it out. You got plenty of time. Make it work and move the hell on. Because if that offense is humming and the defense takes the leg up from the C to C plus to like the B plus, A minus, like you want it to be this year, we're talking 10, 11, 12 wins next year, regardless of who they play.
Yep.
So I don't know. I mean, let's just do this. We got a minute left. So far going into the draft, all things considered, what grade would you give for the Cardinals?
For the free agency period?
Yeah.
I'd give it I think they did so good to get Evan Brown back, to make sure they had depth with Baron Browning in the edge room. The Sweat, the Tomlinson signings, I'm a big fan of them. Outside of those two picks, it wasn't sexy by any means. B minus, I feel. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. Like, my biggest thing that I say here when it comes to moves and it comes to like overall progress, and I've been saying this since 2016, anything that's not a step backwards is a step forwards. And this is not a step backwards. And without the Dalvin Tomlinson signing, we may be having a different conversation also, where it's like, all right, we're going to free ball here and it's going to be Dante Stills and a rookie. I don't really think that's the best course of action. I think they got very lucky that Myles Garrett got $700 billion and they value Denzel Ward more than Dalvin Tomlinson as they should. And I think he was just a flat out cap casualty. And the Cardinals swooped in and like, hey, you want to be a star? You want to live in warm weather? Cool. I'm shocked that they got him for the price they did. That's the like the A+ portion of this for me is the lack of money that Monty Austin-Fort spent. Josh, what, $40 million spread
under $20 million a year? Phenomenal for a top tier pass rusher.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And and obviously these are all 2-year deals. That's the Monty special. So Donnie, tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, at Donnie June on Twitter, and follow our work at si.com/NFL/Cardinals.
Alex Clancy, Locked on Cardinals. Remember, without you, there is no me. I'll talk to you tomorrow.